The college football regular season has come to an end, and the playoff picture continues to shrink. I'm Wheels, back with another week of rankings, and we're going to jump right into it with the teams ranked 9 through 25. I'm going to spend most of this video talking about the top 8, but I do want to note that Louisville has been eliminated from playoff contention with their loss to Kentucky. Also, I don't want to rank any teams with 4 losses right now, which is why you don't see teams like Oregon State, Clemson, and Tennessee in my rankings. Okay, now the top 8. Alabama survived against Auburn thanks to the Milroe miracle, and honestly, they're lucky to still be in contention. I know it's a rivalry game, but this one shouldn't have been close. I know there's going to be complaints about the refs, but it's not their fault when you throw passes after crossing the line of scrimmage, and the illegal blindside block was the right call too. The holding call that negated a touchdown might have been a little ticky-tacky, and this probably should have been a catch, but you're doing yourself no favors when you miss a makeable field goal and stall out multiple times when reaching the red zone. If not for the muffed punt, you probably would have lost this game, and even after that you still needed a miracle thanks to your own mistakes. A win is a win, but please don't overlook your opponents anymore. Your toughest test of the season comes next week against Georgia in the SEC championship game, and a win may be enough to put you in the college football playoff. I'll have more on this game in a little bit when I get to my predictions. Even if Bama does pull off the upset, they might still need some help to reach the top 4. I'd have a 12-1 Alabama team ahead of Ohio State, Georgia, and whoever loses the Pac-12 championship, but you still might have to hope for a loss from either Texas or Florida State if you don't want to be stuck at number 5. Speaking of Texas, they're at number 7 and are coming off their most dominant win of the season. I called them out a little bit last week for struggling to put away wins, and they responded in a big way. They won't be getting a rematch against Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game thanks to an 18-point second half comeback by Oklahoma State against BYU, which does make their path to 12-1 easier, but also takes away a chance to avenge your one loss. When looking ahead, if Georgia and Michigan stay undefeated and the Pac-12 champion takes the 3rd spot in the college football playoff, Texas will probably need a loss from Florida State to get in the top 4. Oregon will stay at 6 for right now. They clinched a spot against Washington in the Pac-12 championship game and will get their chance for revenge against them. They've looked like the best team in the Pac-12, comfortably beating everybody except for that one blemish back in Week 7. With their current ranking ahead of Texas and Alabama, I see the Pac-12 championship game as a win-and-in scenario. With a win, they'd have the same record as Washington, a 1-1 head-to-head record against them, and a conference championship to go with it. Washington has a stronger resume in terms of who they've played, but Oregon has more dominant wins. Oregon needs to pass 2 teams to get in the playoff. Taking down Washington next week will accomplish that, because I'd also rank a 12-1 Oregon ahead of Ohio State, who stays ahead of them at number 5 in these rankings, but also doesn't get to play for the Big Ten championship. Ohio State comes in as the highest-ranked one-loss team, but losing the game to Michigan complicates things for them. Since the Big Ten still has divisions, the 10-2 Pittsburgh Iowa Hawkeyes get to play Michigan in the conference championship game, leaving Ohio State at 11-1 and needing to root against other teams next weekend. They only need to move up 1 spot to get in, but also have to worry about the 3 teams behind them who are all playing to be conference champions. For Ohio State to get in, I think they need to root for the top 3 teams to all win this weekend and both Florida State and Texas to lose. If Alabama beats Georgia, I'd have both of them ahead of Ohio State in the final rankings, which would be enough to keep the Buckeyes out. It's a similar scenario with Oregon and Washington, though a hypothetical 12-1 Washington and 11-1 Ohio State would be fun to try and rank. Michigan will finish ahead of Ohio State either way, so Buckeyes fans can hate watch their game against Iowa without having to worry too much about playoff implications. It's actually better for Ohio State if Michigan stays undefeated because it makes their loss to them look better, but I don't think there will be many Buckeyes fans sitting there openly rooting for that team up north. They do have to worry about Texas as well, who will likely pass them with a win against Oklahoma State. It's still possible for Ohio State to get in, but for it to happen, they need Georgia and Washington to win and Florida State and Texas to lose. Not easy, not very likely, but still possible. As we enter the top 4, the playoff scenarios are all very simple. Win and you're in. At least it should be. I'll start with Florida State at number 4. They survived a battle of backup quarterbacks in Gainesville despite falling behind 12-0 late in the first half to keep their undefeated season alive. They got off to a very slow start in that game, but were able to get into a nice rhythm offensively in the second half. It does help that the Gators self-imploded, doing just about nothing on offense in the second half while losing any sense of discipline on defense, but it was encouraging to see the Seminoles move the ball effectively when they needed it most. They should be in a win-and-in scenario as they look ahead to Louisville in the ACC championship game, but I know that there will still be questions about this team even if they do finish off a 13-0 season. The arguments against them will be that they played in a weak ACC this year, don't have their starting quarterback the rest of the way, and will probably get blown out by Georgia in the semifinal if they do get in. And yeah, there is some legitimacy to all these arguments. The ACC as a whole has not looked all that strong this year, and even then Florida State did struggle at times against teams like Boston College, Pittsburgh, and Miami. But an undefeated Power 5 team has never been left out of the playoff before, and I'm not sure the committee is ready to change that in the final year of the 4-team playoff. Would a 12-1 Texas or Alabama or an 11-1 Ohio State play a more competitive game in the CFP semifinal? Probably. But are we really going to keep a 13-0 ACC champion out of the college football playoff? I'm not so sure. Now, they do have to take care of business against Louisville on Saturday night, and it isn't going to be easy. A loss will surely knock them out of the top 4, so the pressure is on. But win, and I think you got to put them in. Washington stays at number 3 in the rankings. They're now ahead of Ohio State, but fall behind Michigan, who currently has the best win of the season for any team on their resume. Washington continues to survive close games, and have set themselves up well to reach the college football playoff. They're going to have to earn it, though. If they want to get in, they're going to have to beat Oregon again. There are scenarios where they could get in with a loss, but when you have an opportunity to take care of business yourself, you got to take advantage of that. If they were to lose to Oregon, their playoff hopes would be dependent on Florida State, Texas, and Alabama all losing this weekend as well. But then they'd also have to worry about Ohio State jumping them for the final spot in the playoff. I can't wait to see what happens in their rematch with Oregon on Friday night. I'm expecting it to be another classic that comes down to the wire. That's another game that I'll be making predictions for in a little bit, so be sure to stay tuned for that after the rankings. Michigan moves up to number 2 in my rankings. You can make an argument that they should be in the top spot because, as I said before, they now have the best win of the season on their resume, but I still think that Georgia's resume top to bottom is a little bit stronger. With that said, I think they are the only team that is safely in the top 4. Out of the Power 5 championship games this weekend, they have the easiest matchup of them all and are probably still safely in even if they were to lose. A hypothetical 12-1 Michigan, in my opinion, is still ahead of whoever loses the Pac-12 championship. They're still ahead of Ohio State, and they still have a strong resume to stand on if upsets happen in other games. They'd really only run into trouble with a loss if Alabama upsets Georgia, because I'd have both of those teams at 12-1 ahead of a 12-1 Michigan. Let's say Georgia were to win, though, to go along with a Michigan loss. You'd have Georgia in one of the spots, the Pac-12 champion in there, Florida State in as well, assuming they win, and one spot left. At this point, it would come down to Michigan and Texas, assuming the Longhorns beat Oklahoma State. This would be a tough decision because both teams would be 12-1, and Texas would have a conference championship while Michigan wouldn't. You'd have to look deeper into their resumes, though. When looking at their best wins, you'd be comparing a home win over 11-1 Ohio State, who's currently ranked 5th, to a road win over a hypothetical 11-2 Alabama, who's currently ranked 8th but would likely drop with a loss to Georgia, which we're saying will happen in this scenario. Then you look at the quality of their loss. We're saying Michigan would lose to Iowa, who in this case would be an 11-2 conference champion, while Texas lost to a 10-2 Oklahoma team that didn't even reach the conference championship. So Michigan, in this scenario, would have a better win than Texas and a better loss than Texas, while the Longhorns would have a conference championship. Both teams would have a 2-1 record in games against teams currently ranked, so this would really come down to what you value more, a conference championship or a better win and a better loss on your resume. In my opinion, Michigan should come out on top in this debate. Let's not put too much value on winning a conference championship. At the end of the day, Texas is playing Oklahoma State this weekend and Michigan is playing Iowa. This is still a game of football, whether it happens in December or is played in the middle of the season. Both teams already finished at the top of their respective conferences, which earned them the right to play this additional game. Let's not overstate the value of it. Remember, just last year, TCU lost in the Big 12 championship game, and not only did they still make the playoff, they got in as the 3rd-ranked team ahead of Ohio State, who also had just one loss. I know it's not exactly the same comparison because there's more teams in the mix this year, but there is precedent for keeping a team in the playoff even if they lose their conference championship. Again, this entire discussion is only relevant if Michigan were to lose to Iowa on Saturday night, and without giving away too many of my predictions, which will be coming in a little bit, I don't think we're going to have to worry about this. Georgia stays in the top spot, though they did play a much closer game with Georgia Tech than I expected. They need to work on these slow starts they've been having. In their last 6 games, Georgia has only scored first once and have fallen behind 7-0 in 5 of those games. They've obviously won them all, but eventually this will come back to bite if you don't start playing better at the beginning of games. Alabama is going to be their toughest opponent of the season in the SEC championship game, and unlike Michigan, I don't see them as safely in the top 4 regardless of the outcome of their game. If Alabama pulls off the upset, Georgia will already be ranked behind them. They'd also be behind whoever wins the Pac-12 championship game, as well as both Michigan and Florida State, assuming they both win. That's already 4 teams ahead of them. A 12-1 Texas would also have a strong case to be ahead of a 12-1 Georgia, pushing them further out of playoff contention. It doesn't really matter that Georgia is 12-0 and ranked number 1 right now. They still have to earn that playoff spot. In my opinion, unless there's a lot of upsets this weekend, for Georgia, it's winning you're in, losing you're out. Here's a look at the teams ranked 1 through 8, as well as their ranking from last week. Similar to last week's video, I'm now going to do some predictions. I'm only going to focus on the Power 5 championship games because those are the only ones that have playoff implications. Going in chronological order of start times, we'll begin with the Pac-12 championship game. As I said before, this is basically a win-and-in scenario for both teams. I'm expecting it to be a high-scoring game, and like their first matchup, it'll come down to the fourth quarter, maybe even overtime. This will end up being one of the best games of the entire college football season, and I think Oregon will come out on top. They'll put themselves into the college football playoff with a 45-42 win over Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, securing the win with a clutch field goal at the end of the game. Next up is the Big 12 championship between Texas and Oklahoma State. This is the last chance for the Longhorns to build on their resume, which they'll need to look as strong as possible, as their only way into the playoff is a resume battle with the other one-loss teams. What's working against them is they don't have the opportunity to play one of the undefeated teams this weekend. Both Oregon and Alabama have the opportunity to take down one of the 12-0 teams, while Texas gets the 3-loss Cowboys. It's an easier game for them, but offers little additional help in terms of moving up. Texas will need to get the lead early and hold it into the second half, because as we saw last week against BYU, Oklahoma State has no problem running the ball in the second half, which could be trouble for Texas if they fall behind. I don't think they'll have to worry about this though. Their offense is too good, and their defense has looked really strong these last 2 weeks, and honestly has been great all season. Texas will get the win, 38-22, keeping their playoff hopes alive. Now the SEC championship game between Alabama and Georgia. This is going to be an incredible game. Both teams have a lot of firepower on offense, but I think their defenses will play a big part in this one. There will be a defensive touchdown scored in this game, and it'll likely end up being the difference in determining a winner. Both teams have played well enough to be in the college football playoff, but only one of them will get in, and I have Georgia finishing off a perfect season with a win over Alabama, 31-27. We'll go to the Big Ten championship game next, which is the only one out of the 5 that I won't be able to post highlights for. It's the same reason why I couldn't post a video for the Michigan vs. Ohio State game. Anyway, to get into my predictions, I don't really see a way for Iowa to stay in this one. They have a great defense, but it won't be enough to slow down Michigan, and the Hawkeyes don't have a strong enough offense to keep up with the Wolverines. This one won't be particularly close, leading to most fans switching the channel to watch the ACC championship instead, which is on at the same time, as Michigan will get the win 35-11. That leaves one more game, which may be the most important in determining who gets the final spot in the college football playoff. If my first 4 predictions are right, this outcome will decide if Ohio State, Washington, and Texas have anything to watch for in the selection show on Sunday. If Florida State wins, they'll lock up the final spot and likely be ranked at number 3. However, a loss will surely knock them out of contention, opening the door for another one-loss team to sneak in. Louisville won't make it easy on them, though. They want to make up for a tough home loss to Kentucky, and there's no better way to do that than by winning the ACC championship and knocking a conference rival out of the playoff. I think Louisville will jump out to a 2-score lead, but Florida State will put together a second-half comeback to make this one come down to the wire. However, after falling behind midway through the fourth quarter for the first time all game, Louisville will have an explosive play that leads to a go-ahead touchdown late in the game, and close it out with a stop on defense to hand the Seminoles their first loss of the season and open up one final spot in the college football playoff. Louisville gets the win, 23-20. Tell me down in the comments what you think of my predictions. Did I get it right? Based on these 5 outcomes, my final college football playoff rankings would be Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2, Oregon at 3, and Texas in the final spot, with Ohio State and Washington as the first 2 teams out. Let me know who you think will end up being in the college football playoff. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you enjoy all the conference championship games being played this weekend.